Hello, OpAmp here, and today we're going to be going through the steps to make these custom 3D printed grips or scales for the side of your pick. These are designed in Fusion 360, printed out on my printer. I haven't glued these on yet, but just to show you, you can get some pretty good resolution here. This is quite comfortable for the finger, and I even put a little mark on there. You could put your own personal symbol or something that's meaningful to you. So we're going to get into Fusion 360 and I'll show you how to make these. Okay, so I'm here in Fusion 360. I've just set up a blank space here. Name my file Pick Handle Tutorial. Now we're going to just make sure that our units are in millimeters. If you're working in a different unit, you can hit change units. So that's fine. Click this little arrow here. And we are going to first create a new component. I always like to do that just because later on, if I want to import this into something else or change it, it's a little bit easier to do. If I want to change the name of that, I just double click on that and I can name this Pick Handle. And so you see now I've got Pick Handle as my component. And what I'm going to start with is a sketch, and that's going to be that 2D drawing, but in the computer. We can do this a couple of ways. We can either go up to the Create menu here, Create Sketch. We can also right click, and there is an option right here, Create Sketch. There's a third way to do this, which is if you hit S on your keyboard, it comes up with shortcuts. I already have the sketch here, but if you didn't, you could do and type sketch and it'll come out right there. So there's multiple different ways to do this. I'm going to do it from the top down here. So I'm going to click right there. So the first thing we have here is we have our width of our pick. That was slightly less than a centimeter, but we're going to make our grip a centimeter so that we have a little bit more meat to grip onto. You can really make it as tight or loose as you want. I'm also printing an ABS, which tends to shrink, and so I'm making it a little oversized for that reason. So we're going to start with 1 centimeter, and I know that I want my ends rounded off, so I'm going to make a circle. So I can hit C. That automatically brings up the circle tool. If you don't want to hit C, and by the way, to get out of any of these tools, you just hit escape. Come up here, create center diameter circle. There's menus. You can also hit that S and type circle. So in any case, I'm going to do circle for center diameter circle. That means we're working from the center out. And I'm going to do 10 because we're in millimeters. And you see we have our circle now that is 10 millimeters. I'm going to build my pick handle kind of coming out to the side here. So I know that my length of my pick is 8 centimeters. So that's 80 millimeters. And now remember, we have our circle here and we want it to be 80 millimeters from the end here. Now I could do some sketch work here and hit L for line right in the center and drag that over and it will lock. And now I have a point that I can build out from. I can also do this a couple of other ways. I can come out from the center and go right here. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to do that little line. So I'm going to hit L for line and I'm going to come right into the center. And you see it's making this little dotted line. And when it comes right here, it's going to snap to the edge of that circle and make a little X. And that's what we want there. And so I'm going to click and now move that out. So now it's sort of parallel to the direction that we want to go. And because that circle is 10 millimeters, we want to subtract half of that so that our total comes out how we want it. So it would have been 80 millimeters for that 8 centimeters. Instead, we're going to make that line 75. And we'll hit enter and we can zoom out here. And you can see we have that 75. Now we're going to do the same thing with the other side. We're going to come to the center of the circle, not clicking yet. Come to the edge, we'll click when it snaps there, and again we'll make that 75. Now, I actually messed up because I forgot that we need a rounded circle on the other side. So we actually want to make these 70. Now, this line right here is a dimension line, and I can move that wherever I want. I'm going to move those to the outside. The great thing about this being parametric is I can double click, hit 70, and it's going to shorten that line. Same thing there, 70, and shorten that line. And as you get a little more advanced in Fusion, there are ways of mirroring things, making them work a little bit better. But for now, we're going to keep this as is. And then I'm going to make another circle here. But instead of doing that center diameter and sort of having to line things up, which I could certainly do, I could hit C for circle, move it down here, move it over here, kind of line everything up. What I can do is do a different kind of circle. come up to create, circle, 2-point circle. And you can also, of course, get that from hitting S in the shortcuts. Now I'm just going to drag it right between those, and you can see it's already at 10. And now we've got our handle set up sort of as a prototype of the handle. Now we don't need this inner circle piece right there. And what I can actually do is hit T for trim, and I can come in here and just trim the inside of that circle. And it's going to say constraints were removed. That's totally fine. That just means some of these numbers that are locking these together were removed. It's not a problem. So I'm going to hit escape for a moment just to get out of this. I'm just going to show you what this could look like. So if I take this and highlight it, that's going to sort of be our model here. And if I hit E for extrude, I can drag that up. So let's say our scale on the side here, our handle or scale, sometimes you use that interchangeably, it's going to be 2 millimeters. So now you can see, really simple, we've got this little plastic, potentially plastic scale here. Now, maybe I want to make this a little more complex, so I'm going to hit Control Z and undo that extrude for the moment, although you can leave it, and I'll show you that later, that if you edit inside the sketch, it will update into the physical model. So now that we've got this here, you remember we were doing sort of this like chevron pattern all the way down, and then maybe we'll add a symbol, something like that. So I'm going to start first with my chevron pattern, and since it's relatively simple, I'm going to be using just lines to sketch this out. You can also do all sorts of different shapes. For example, a polygon, and do something like a circumscribed polygon. So I'm going to use this as my middle, and then just drag that right out to the edge. And you see now I've got this really nice shape already that's pretty kind of pre-formed. In fact, maybe let's take advantage of that. Let's switch up this design slightly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit Control Z for undo, and I'm going to make a line. And I'm going to make this line between the two extents, the edges here. So I'm just using this center of the circle to help me. Come over here, you can see we can snap the first point. I'm going to bring this line all the way over, snap that one. And now we've got a line down the center. And what we're going to do is you can see we sort of have two halves. So what I want to do is select that line, hit X, and you see construction here gets highlighted. And now it's a line that exists to help us, but will not be extruded. You see I'm now doing the full selection. So let's go back into that create polygon, and I'll show you why we made that line in a second. But if we go into polygon and we're going to do circumscribed polygon, I can actually select, you see right here, center. So if I move and then I come, that little triangle means I'm at the center. So I'm at the center of this whole scale here and the line. Now if I click and I drag my polygon out, that's centered directly in the center of this whole thing. And so let's hit escape for a moment and let's think about this. So we have this piece, this piece, this piece. Now, if I want to take just these two, I can hit Control and click on both of them. So again, I can select this or this, but if I hold Control, I click on both of these. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit S, and I'm going to do rectangular pattern. Now you can also get this from the menu, and now you can see I've got these two arrows and a number here. And what this is going to do is allow me to drag this arrow, and you can see I'm dragging out those drawing lines on this sketch. And let's say I want to make maybe 4 of these chevrons. So I'm going to pull that out. And that looks pretty good to me. But remember, we wanted sort of an alternating pattern. So let's think about that. That's kind of a large chunk to be alternating. So let's make a few more instead. So we've got 6, 7, 8. Let's take a look at 8 and see how that looks. So that kind of looks neat to me. And that's 30.2 millimeters. I kind of like making round numbers. So let's make that 30, and we hit enter there. So immediately you see we've got an interesting pattern going here. And what I'm going to do is kind of show you what that would look extruded. So if I hit E for extrude, now I've got to select what I want to extrude. So I'm going to sort of alternate my extrusion, which features I want extruded here. And we'll come right over there. And now I'm going to again bring this up by 2 millimeters. And you see we've got this sort of intermittent pattern. Doesn't look so great yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my extrude, and I'm actually going to make that 1 millimeter. And you'll see why in a moment. I'm going to go back into my menu here, select my sketch, and now I'm going to do another extrude. And this time I'm going to select everything, and I can do that by dragging. And I'm going to do -1. Now when I come out of this sketch here, and I can turn off visibility for a minute, you can see we've got this nice little raised scale pattern, and we're kind of getting a different look to it. Now I'll show you in a moment, we can also do some interesting things if we want the chevron inset, but I'm going to do the same thing and mirror this on the other side. So I'm going to go back into my sketch here. We're going to select these 2 lines this time, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do our rectangular pattern again. I'm going to click and drag just to get that moving, but I know that I want this to be 30, so we're going to do -30, and then I know that we want 8 of those, and I'm going to hit enter. So you see now I've kind of got this all set up right here. And I'm going to show you a little trick. We can hit finish sketch, and you see it doesn't look any different. Now if I go down to my history here, I can see that that was one extrude that was done, and that was another extrude that was done. So if I actually click on that extrude, which contains the top features, and I double click, I can actually edit that extrude. So what I can do right here is unclick this, and unclick that, and unclick that, and unclick that, and then I'm going to click OK. And now you see we've got this nice little pattern going with relatively few steps. What I want to do is sort of have this double edge coming around here. And how I'm going to do that is actually go back into my sketch again. Sketch is very, very useful. And I'm going to take this edge here, and I'm going to offset it a little bit. Now remember, this is pretty much solid here. When we go out of the sketch, you can see this is solid, so I don't have to really mess with it. And I'll show you exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to select this line right here, and I'm going to hit S and do off for offset. These are also in the create and modify menus. And I'm just going to offset that by 1 millimeter to start. And you see how it's moving in by 1 millimeter. I'm going to click OK. And you see it's kind of got this little hanging piece. We'll take care of that in a second. We're going to go down here. We're going to do S and then offset again. You see it's at 1 millimeter, but it's going to be outside. So we're going to do -1 millimeter. And now we're back inside. And now we're going to do trim. So T for trim again. And just trim those little ends off so that when we extrude, there's not going to be any issues. So you see we've got those little ends trimmed off. I'm just going to hit escape to get out of that mode. We're going to do this extrude now. So I'm going to hit finish sketch for the moment. You see nothing's changed. I'm going to go back into my extrude that we had before, which was the top layer. Double click on that. And you see that comes up. And now I can select these little lines here. And you see as I'm selecting inside the lines that were defined when we made that offset, that I'm actually raising up sort of a border, because all I'm doing is extruding this piece here. So I'm going to come around the edge here, and that looks pretty nice. Hit OK. And you see now I've got this nice little offset extrude going on, and that's pretty much a done deal. If I wanted to make the inside of this a little bit fancier, I could take these edges and offset them also, make that into something. But this looks kind of nice, and maybe I want to put a logo here later or something like that. So we could sort of do the opposite of this. So this is a nice little grip where your skin is sort of going to fall into this. You can also do a grip where this sort of protrudes like you saw before. So what we could do is sort of, I guess you would say the inverse of that. And if I go back into my sketch here, and you see that before I had done every other one that was extruded. So if we come out here and I want to do a new extrude, so we're going to hit visibility on our sketch so we can actually see these and select these. So I'm going to click right here and hold Control for all of these right here. And now I'm going to hit E for extrude, and we'll just get a little bit of better view here. And now I can drag those out. So let's say I make those 2 millimeters, hit enter. So now I'll get rid of my visibility just so you can kind of see, and now you can see it's a raised surface. So there's a lot of things you can do with this. Now let's say you weren't sure which version you want to go with. Go down to your timeline right here. If you right click, you can either delete that, or if you want to just play around with it, you can actually hit suppress features and it will remove that temporarily. You can always go back and do unsuppress features. And that's the same with like this extrude here. I could do suppress features right there. Now it looks totally blank, but I could unsuppress the other ones and you'll see that extrude comes up. So there's a lot of options here and a lot of different ways that you can do this. Now, in terms of sort of rounding these corners, generally with a 3D print, it's not going to be so sharp and crisp. If for some reason it's a little sharp for you, these insets will probably be fine. But let's say the outside you want to round a little bit. All you have to do is come to this edge and select it. And we're going to hit right click, and you can do fillet or chamfer. So if you do a fillet, it will slightly round over that edge. As you see, I'm moving this. Now remember, we're talking about millimeters here. So I would probably just round it to 1. And in fact, if you go more, it might error out for you. So it's actually not. Sometimes we'll give you a little error, but remember that if I go here and I do 0, our little distance right here was only 1. So I don't really want to start rounding into everything. So I'm just going to do 1, and we'll hit that, and that looks kind of nice for me and will probably be nice and comfortable. And we're going to leave this edge crisp because that's going to go right against the pick. So now let's say that we wanted to add a little text to this or something like that. So what we can do is create a new sketch right on the surface here. And we can do that by create sketch. And now this is actually the face and the plane that we're going to be working on for that sketch. We want to add some text. So we're going to go over here and we are going to do create text. And we're just going to click over here for now. Any place is fine. And we're going to put a 1. We're going to come around over here. We're going to click on the center of that little circle there, and we'll bring this down. And that pretty much fills that up. If we want to change the size, for example, maybe we want to make that 8, we can change the size right here and put that right in the center. For our purposes, let's put that back up to 10. And that's sort of the height. And that's about centered right there. So that looks good to me. I'm going to click OK. And now you see we've got our little number 1. If I hit E for extrude, I can actually move that and extrude through the other piece. So if I go up, I'm extruding positive off of that sketch, and you can see I would make a one that kind of debosses off the surface. If I go down, it actually will turn red and cut in. So let's say I want to go down as deep as this right here. So I'm going to do -1 millimeter and hit enter. And now you can see we've cut that little number 1 right into there. And so you see, with like just a little bit of effort, a little bit of time, you can make all sorts of patterns and things like that. And of course, you can use that line tool in your sketch to draw whatever you like. When you go into your sketch, I'll just show you for a moment, and you do create, you can see there's rectangles, arcs, polygons, all sorts of things. And there's tons of tutorials on starting Fusion, which can really help you out with this. So I'm going to get to printing in a minute here. In order to do that in Fusion, what you can do is I usually select either the object in here, that like the body that I'm going to be printing, or in this case, I'm printing the whole thing. And so I'm going to click on the top of the tree here, activate it. And in the top here under tools, there's actually a thing that says make, which is for 3D printing. You can also drop this down and there's different tools. So we're going to click on the 3D print, and you can see it's already turned this into a mesh. I'm going to click OK. And the refinement here, I find that medium is way more than adequate for most FDM printers. I'm going to click OK here and load up our slicing program. Mine is Simplify 3D. You may be using a different one. And what I'm going to do right here is just lay this down onto the bed and take a look at it. It looks okay. Just center it up here, and we'll take a look at our printing settings. I'm printing in ABS right now, which is fine. And I'm going to add on to a skirt or brim. And I'm going to make a brim, and that's extra printing material around the edge. I can show you right here. And that's just because it helps with adhesion to the bed. So especially something like this where it's very flat and long, it tends to warp or pull off the bed, especially with something like ABS. And so this sort of just helps you stick that down to the bed. So let me go back for a moment, and I'm just going to look at our layer heights. Right now I'm at 0.2 millimeter. That's fine for me. You might want to go to 0.1, but I'm also probably going to be doing a little bit of sanding to finish this off. Let's see how long 2 would take. About 19 minutes to print. So that's really not so bad. I'm actually going to go ahead and just do 2 of them. And then I'll kind of show you the result in a few minutes. So you can see that with just a few easy steps, you can make these nice little custom scales for your picks. You can just put these on a little bit of epoxy, and you're good to go. If you have any comments, questions, anything you'd like to see in the future, please leave the comments below. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe. And thank you for watching. This has been OpAmp.